What if the thing stopping you from speaking English fluently is not your grammar, not your vocabulary, and not your accent, but your desperate need to get everything perfectly right?
Hello and welcome. We are so glad to have you here. I'm Sophie.
And I'm David. It is genuinely wonderful to have you here with us today.
Before we get into what I think is one of the most important mindset conversations we've had on this podcast, a quick and warm request. If you're enjoying Pause Café, please subscribe to the channel right now. It's completely free and it means you'll never miss a new episode.
Please like this video as well. It takes 1 second and it helps us reach more English learners around the world who need exactly this conversation. And we have a question for you today. Here it is.
When was the last time you stopped yourself from speaking English because you were afraid of making a mistake? Write your answer in the comments below. We want to know. And if you have a friend who is learning English and struggling with confidence, please share this episode with them right now. It might be exactly what they need to hear.
Right, let's get into it. Because today, we are talking about something that I believe is the single biggest obstacle for most English learners. And it is not grammar. It is not vocabulary. It is not pronunciation.
It is perfectionism. The belief that you need to get everything right before you can move forward. The voice in your head that says, "Don't speak until you're sure. Don't try until you're ready. Don't make mistakes."
And today, we are going to challenge that voice directly. Because the research, the experience, and honestly just common sense all point to the same conclusion. Progress, not perfection, is what actually moves you forward.
Let's start by understanding what we actually mean by perfectionism in the context of language learning, because I think it's slightly different from perfectionism in other areas of life.
In language learning, perfectionism usually looks like this. You know some English, maybe quite a lot of English, but before you speak, you mentally check the grammar. You search for exactly the right word. You worry about your pronunciation. And if you're not completely sure everything is correct, you hesitate. You stay silent. You let the moment pass.
Or you practice a sentence privately in your head 5 or 6 times before you feel comfortable saying it out loud. Or you avoid certain situations entirely, phone calls, meetings, social events where you might have to speak English, because the risk of making a mistake feels too great.
Does any of that sound familiar?
If it does, you are not alone. This pattern is extraordinarily common among English learners at every level. And interestingly, it often gets worse as learners improve.
That's such an important point. You might expect that as your English gets better, your fear of making mistakes decreases. But often the opposite happens. Because the more you know, the more you're aware of everything you don't know. The higher your standards become. And the gap between where you are and where you want to be can actually feel bigger, not smaller.
Psychologists call this the competence-confidence gap. As your competence grows, your awareness of your own limitations grows at the same rate, or sometimes faster. So your confidence doesn't automatically follow your competence.
Which means that improving your English doesn't automatically solve the perfectionism problem. You have to address the mindset directly.
And that's exactly what we're doing today.
Before we talk about solutions, I want to spend a moment on what perfectionism actually costs you. Because I think when people examine the real price they're paying, the motivation to change becomes much stronger.
The most obvious cost is missed practice opportunities. Every time you stay silent when you could have spoken, every conversation you avoid, every question you don't ask, every sentence you swallow back, that is a practice opportunity lost forever.
And practice opportunities are the currency of language learning. You cannot become fluent without them. Reading and studying give you the material, but speaking and using the language is what builds fluency. And perfectionism is systematically robbing you of those opportunities.
The second cost is the experience of connection. Because language is not primarily a system of rules, it is a tool for human connection. And every time you let perfectionism keep you silent, You are choosing a correct but empty silence over an imperfect but genuine connection.
I think about this a lot. Some of the most meaningful conversations I've ever had were full of mistakes, mine and the other person's. But the warmth, the effort, the genuine desire to communicate, that comes through regardless of the grammar.
And people respond to that. In my experience, and I've worked with hundreds of English learners over the years, native speakers are almost universally patient and appreciative when someone is trying to communicate in their language. They are not sitting there noting your errors. They are listening to what you're trying to say.
Third cost, and this one is perhaps the most damaging, the effect on your self-image as a language learner. Because perfectionism tends to create a very binary way of thinking about your English. Either it's good enough or it isn't. Either you get it right or you failed.
And that binary thinking makes every mistake feel like evidence of fundamental inadequacy, rather than what it actually is, which is evidence that you're learning.
Mistakes are not the opposite of progress. Mistakes are the mechanism of progress. They are literally how the brain refines and improves its language use. Without mistakes, there is no learning signal. There is nothing for the brain to correct and improve.
A child learning to walk doesn't stand at the edge of the room analyzing the biomechanics of locomotion until they're confident they can do it perfectly. They stand up, they wobble, they fall, they stand up again, and gradually, through thousands of wobbles and falls, they learn to walk.
And nobody watches a toddler fall and thinks, "What a failure." They think, "Look at them learning." We need to extend the same compassion to ourselves as adult language learners.
So what does it actually look like to focus on progress rather than perfection? Because I think this is a genuine shift in how you approach language learning. Not just a positive attitude, but a different set of practical behaviors.
The first and most fundamental shift is changing the question you ask yourself after any language interaction. Most perfectionists ask, "Did I get everything right? What mistakes did I make? How far am I from perfect?"
The progress mindset asks different questions. Did I communicate what I wanted to communicate? Did the other person understand me? Did I use a word or a structure I've never used before? Was I a little more confident than last time?
These questions direct your attention toward evidence of progress, which is always there if you look for it, rather than evidence of imperfection, which is also always there if you look for it.
It's like the difference between looking at a half-full glass and a half-empty glass. The glass contains the same amount of water. What changes is what you choose to focus on.
The second shift, and this is a practical one, is embracing what I like to call the good enough standard. In language communication, good enough means the message was understood. The meaning got through. Connection happened.
And good enough in that sense is genuinely, completely good enough. Because the purpose of language is communication, not grammatical perfection. If someone understands you, you have succeeded. Full stop.
I want to tell you something about native speakers actually. Native speakers make mistakes constantly. They use the wrong word. They start a sentence and abandon it halfway through. They mix up idioms. They speak in incomplete sentences. They use informal grammar in formal situations.
And nobody thinks less of them for it. Because communication is fluid and messy and human. And that's perfectly fine.
The third shift, setting progress-based goals rather than perfection-based goals. A perfection-based goal sounds like, "I want to speak English without any mistakes," which is not only impossible, but also unmeasurable. How would you know when you'd achieved it?
A progress-based goal sounds like, "I want to have one English conversation per day this week." Or, "I want to use 3 new words I learnt this week in a real conversation." Or, "I want to make a phone call in English that I've been avoiding." These are specific, measurable, and completely achievable.
And every time you achieve a progress-based goal, regardless of how many mistakes you made along the way, you build something that perfectionism consistently destroys: confidence.
Because confidence doesn't come from being perfect. Confidence comes from taking action and surviving. Every time you speak English imperfectly and the world doesn't end, every time you make a mistake and the conversation continues, your nervous system learns that speaking English is safe, and it becomes a little easier the next time.
Psychologists call this exposure and response prevention. The more you expose yourself to the thing you fear, in this case, speaking imperfect English, and the more you observe that nothing catastrophic happens, the weaker the fear becomes.
Which means the single most effective thing you can do to overcome perfectionism in English is simply to speak imperfectly, repeatedly, and notice that you survive.
Let's get very practical, because I want to give you specific things you can do, starting today, to shift from a perfectionism mindset to a progress mindset.
Strategy 1. The one new thing rule. Every time you have a conversation in English, give yourself one simple goal. Use one new word. Try one new grammatical structure. Ask one question you've never asked before. Just one thing. Everything else can be as simple and safe as you like.
This approach removes the overwhelming pressure of trying to perform perfectly across the whole conversation. You have one tiny goal, and if you achieve it, that is a win. A real, genuine, meaningful win.
Strategy 2. Keep a progress journal. Not a mistakes journal, a progress journal. At the end of each day or each week, write down 3 things you did in English that you're proud of. They can be tiny. I understood a native speaker on a podcast without rewinding. I used the word apprehensive correctly in a sentence. I asked for directions in English and the person understood me.
These entries might feel insignificant in the moment, but over weeks and months, they build an undeniable record of growth. And on the days when perfectionism whispers, "You're not improving," you can open that journal and see the evidence that says otherwise.
Strategy 3. Reframe mistakes as data. Every time you make a mistake in English, and you will, constantly, and that is wonderful, try to see it as information rather than failure. Your brain just received a signal that something needs adjusting. That signal is valuable. That signal is learning.
A really practical way to do this is to keep a small note of the mistakes you make repeatedly. Not to punish yourself, but to notice patterns. If you keep making the same error, that's useful information. It tells you where to direct a little extra attention.
Strategy 4. Compare yourself to your past self, not to native speakers. This is so important. So many learners measure their English against the standard of a native speaker, and then feel inadequate because they fall short.
But that comparison makes no sense. A native speaker has been using English every single day for their entire life. Of course, their English is better than yours. Comparing yourself to them is like a person who has been playing piano for 2 years, comparing themselves to a concert pianist who has been playing for 40.
The only meaningful comparison is between you today and you 6 months ago, you 3 months ago, you last week. Are you better than you were? Can you do things now that you couldn't do then? That is progress, and that is all that matters.
Strategy 5. Celebrate effort, not just results. In a progress mindset, the attempt is what deserves recognition. Did you try to use English today, even though it was uncomfortable? That is worth celebrating. Did you push through the hesitation and speak even when you weren't sure? That is remarkable.
Because the attempt is what produces the learning. The attempt is the work. The result, whether it was perfect or messy, is almost beside the point. The fact that you tried is what matters.
And every attempt makes the next attempt a little easier. That is how momentum works. That is how fluency is built. Not in one perfect moment, but in hundreds of imperfect attempts that gradually, quietly transform into ease. Before we bring today's conversation to a close, I want to say something directly. Something I wish someone had told me when I was learning a new language and feeling completely overwhelmed by how far I had to go. Please go ahead, because I think this is important.
You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not too old, too busy, or too limited. You are exactly where you are, and that is a perfectly valid place to start moving forward from.
Every single person who speaks English fluently today was once at your level. Every single one of them made mistakes. Every single one of them had moments of frustration and doubt and the strong desire to give up.
The difference between those who achieved fluency and those who didn't is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not even the amount of time they studied. It is whether they kept going, whether they chose, again and again, imperfectly and courageously, to try.
Progress, not perfection. Those three words, lived consistently over time, will take you further than any grammar book, any vocabulary app, or any language course ever could.
Today's phrase, and it is a beautifully British one that fits perfectly, to take something in your stride. It means to deal with a difficulty or a setback calmly and without letting it stop you. You might say, she made a few mistakes in the presentation, but took it completely in her stride. Or, learning a language is full of challenges, but he takes every setback in his stride.
Take your mistakes in your stride. That is the goal. Not to eliminate mistakes, but to make them calmly, learn from them quietly, and keep moving forward.
Right, before we go, our question for the comments. When was the last time you stopped yourself from speaking English because you were afraid of making a mistake? Tell us, we genuinely want to know. And tell us, after today's episode, what is one thing you are going to do differently?
Please subscribe if you haven't already. We have new episodes every single week, completely free. A like on the video means more learners can find us. And please share this with a friend who is learning English and struggling with confidence. This might be exactly the conversation they need.
From both of us, thank you so much for being here. Keep going, keep trying, take it in your stride.
See you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.